Hi, this is Alex Romanovich, and welcome to Global Edge Talk. Today is April 17, 2012. Our guest is Liz Picarazzi. Hello, Liz.
Hi, Alex.
It's so great to catch up with you after so many years and knowing you for so many years. What an incredible opportunity to talk about your success. I'm really anxious to ask you a whole bunch of questions based on what's going on right now in the United States and globally. Liz is the founder and CEO of a company called Citibin. It's a Brooklyn-based manufacturer of rat-proof, weather-resistant trash and parcel enclosures that have become a fixture on New York City stoops and increasingly sidewalks, as well as office plazas, and not just New York City, but also nationwide, from what I understand. You built your first prototype in 2012 inside of your handyman business called Checklist Home Services. And then you've done something really incredible. You spun the Citibin out of its own company in 2016, and 2019 sold the Checklist to focus on Citibin. So it was an invention. It was a transaction. It was a lot, all of those things. And important to mention that over the last 18 to 24 months, you've become one of the most visible small business voices in the United States, especially, within the tariff debate and supply chain debate. And you became famous. You stood up the U.S. production in Indiana. You appeared on CNBC, Bloomberg, NPR, and a variety of LinkedIn and trade press columns and podcasts. And you really are a promoter of American small, medium-sized manufacturing business. You're one of the very few women in the U.S. manufacturing business. And I'm very happy to talk to you today. So welcome to our studio.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for inviting me. And it's been so many years since we worked together.
I know. It's incredible. So, Liz, let's start in the beginning. You said that Citibin exists because you live among the trash and the rats in New York City. I mean, I'm a New York City resident, and it's a nice way of putting it, an interesting way of putting it, if you will. Take us back to that moment when, and what did you see on your block in Brooklyn that made you think that there was actually a business out of this?
So I live in New York City, as you said, and rats are among the biggest problems in the city tied to trash. And the lack of containerization of trash is obviously creating a buffet of food for rats to eat every single night. So for me, the original insight actually did not have to do with rats. It had to do with aesthetics. And so you walk around, you see very nice homes in New York, but everybody puts their trash cans in front of their homes because we don't have garages and driveways and alleys like the rest of the country. And so I realized this is a really sort of a contradictory eyesore to have these trash cans in front of otherwise very lovely homes. And so I realized there was an opportunity here from aesthetics standpoint, but also public health, public cleanliness, and the rat issue. At the time, I was running a handyman company. We did custom carpentry, and I had a few customers ask for custom trash enclosures. So that was back like 2013, 2014. Started building in my backyard. We moved over to a dedicated fabrication space in the Navy Yard. And then I would say sort of the biggest jump in the business came from when moving from custom to mass manufacturing and design it in a way that it was easily modular. If people have 3 trash cans, they get a 3 module. If they have 7, they get a 7 module. Some cities go with 8 gigantic modules and put them all together. But from the very beginning, really the insights were about the aesthetics and the public health.
Great beginning. Excellent. But in the path that led you here is also very interesting because before that, you were a part of a Checklist Home Services. It's a handyman's business. Prior to that, you came through a pretty traditional corporate path, if you will. This is when you and I got together working with some of the major brands out there. And it was kind of interesting. It was an interesting experience. So, throughout the entire this path, what do you think that really prepared you for being a true entrepreneur and creating a product, most importantly, which is not only useful but is also very, very unique?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that prepared me is just who I am. I'm a very curious person. Most entrepreneurs are very curious. So if they see something that doesn't seem right in the world, instead of just walking past it and thinking there's ugly trash cans, an entrepreneur will get in their head and they'll think, how could I do this differently? So for me, in the corporate jobs I had before, like I did okay there, but I never would have climbed up because I'm a very curious entrepreneurial person. And those types of people often don't go very far in corporate. So for me, reaching what probably was the top of my career MBA traditional type of job, I took the leap to entrepreneurship. And part of the way I was able to do that was I was moonlighting my handyman company, which became Checklist Home Services, on the side while I was at American Express. So I, had the fixation on handyman services because of my own unmet need. When I bought a house and I needed to renovate it, I had a hard time finding people for sort of lighter home maintenance tasks like hanging shelves or mounting a TV, painting a nursery, assembling a crib, any of these things that people really need someone to help with, but you don't really have the time or the energy to find many contractors to do all of those things. And so Checklist Home Services also came from my own need and my own household to essentially find a handyman for a day, which is sort of the productized service that we offer. And, it came from inherently being an entrepreneur, having the curiosity and noticing unmet needs that I had an impulse to try to fix.
Great story, and I'm a strong believer into a method to product type of a path. As a matter of fact, we even, Gem even has a productization service and practice. And I love the story. I love the fact that you recognize the value of taking services, productizing services, and building methods into product. And not, some people will say, well, aluminum can, what's a big deal, right? But it's a very, it's a very specific product. From what I understand, it's a powder-coated aluminum enclosure for the main line. It's rat-proof. That means that I guess they cannot, bite through it or whatever. It's built to last, and you even have variations of it with a steel option that you call Grisbin, and that's for the Bear Country. I guess it's not just for the New York City; it's also for the folks that have to deal, like Pennsylvania. And I used to have a place in Pennsylvania. We used to have black bears over there and brown bears.
Yeah.
So
That,
very, very,
yeah.
very appropriate.
Yeah. Well, and that also came from the Grisbin, which are bear resistant version, is that once we became somewhat famous for our rat proof enclosures in New York, and people in other parts of the country that have bear issues heard about Citibin, they contacted us and said, do you have a bear version? And we didn't. And so we needed to adapt the product. The biggest change is shifting from aluminum to steel because bears can get into aluminum. They're very smart. They are able to detect weakness in any material that you build with. And so that was something that I would say, you know what, that wasn't my idea. That was my prospective customer's idea. And they bring it to our attention and we say, how can we solve for that? And that's how we've been able to create the different product lines. It started with homes and then it moved to cities and parks and then to bears.
Incredible story. I'm assuming raccoons as well, right?
Yes, yes. And squirrels.
But yeah, but that story that in 2015 to 2017 that takes you to China, and as many manufacturers at that time in the United States, exploring Chinese option, if you will, you did the same thing, right? Tell me about this experience. Tell me what at that time, what was the impetus, so to speak, to do so? Was it just cost? Was it other factors? And how did you, were you faced at all with the made in China type of a label, if you will, that you were going to have on your product?
So that's such a good question. And I like to be able to talk about it because I don't think most people understand the thought process that a manufacturer goes through in order to make such a big decision to offshore. So for us, we started and we did custom for a couple of years. Then the market demand was such that we realized we wanted to mass manufacture. So we essentially redesigned it to be a ready to assemble kit. And we started manufacturing in 2 US states. And we did that for a couple of years and found that, believe it or not, for price, quality, and time, which are the three things that you usually get only one of, when you're in services. I wasn't getting any of them. And right around the time I probably was about to throw in the towel, I'm in an entrepreneur organization called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. It's a worldwide organization. And at a social event, I met someone whose family started a contract manufacturing company in Taiwan 50 years ago and met them here in the US. They live here now. And they basically heard my difficulty with US manufacturing. I won't say all US manufacturing, but the factories I tried to work with, and said, come take a look, come visit. Our main office is in Shanghai. We can set you up to visit some factories, give us some drawings, obviously signed NDAs. And about 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Shanghai. And the motivation was that I needed the right price. I needed it to not take too long, and I needed the quality that I wanted. And so those were the three criteria. And the feeling of, am I outsourcing this to China? And I don't know, say like a shame in that was much lower than the feeling as an entrepreneur of I want my product made and I don't care where it's made as long as I can afford it. It's the right timing and I get the quality I want. So I shifted some of my production to China to see if I would get those things. And I did. And I have been in Asia now for 8 years, both in China and Vietnam. I've been with the same company the whole time. So I have an agent that's sort of the intermediary between myself and my factories. And that's also been sort of a factor in the success because that introduction I got through EO led me to an incredible contract manufacturer that has done a great job, not only with those things I wanted, but also in innovating and expanding the product line. So I guess what I would say is I've sort of gotten over the shame because I've built a really great business that otherwise would not exist if the economics hadn't worked. It enabled me to start getting paid. It enabled me to hire my husband as the COO and to have our entire household income based on the business. And it's been really good. I'm not a manufacturer that's looking for the cheapest price. I'm looking for the most reliable partner. And that's not something that Americans understand typically either. I'm not an American that is just going factory to find the cheapest price. There are some manufacturers that do it. For me, I was looking for a long-term partner that I could grow with, that believed in the product, would help me with engineering and design and support, all of which they did. So my experience has been really good, but I'm one person and I may just have had the best introduction my business could have ever gotten by being in a professional organization where I met this person that led me to the factory that now has helped so much in our development.
Great story. Great story. The continuation of this story is even more interesting. So let's fast forward to today, or this year, I should say. And this is the part of the story that puts you in front of Bloomberg, NBC, NPR, and a variety of other media outlets. You've written that your tariff rate has changed 5 times in 8 years, and you started at roughly 7.5%, 8%. Take us through the trajectory and when the rate changed, and since the time you started Citibin, and what it is today.
Sure. So when I first started, I was at like 77.5%. And then the Section 232 tariffs, which are about assigning tariffs to industries that are viewed as potentially like economic vulnerabilities or threats from foreign like manufacturers to US. So that during the first Trump administration put us up to 25% for a while, but then that was actually lowered back to 7.5%. So in the first Trump administration, I was at, by the end of it, 7.5%. And then throughout the whole Biden administration, I stayed at that 7.5%. But then even before Trump was elected, Biden and then Harris both spoke about raising the tariff to 25%. So I saw that the writing on the wall, that was going to happen regardless of who was in the White House. And then that initiated our search to move production from China to Vietnam. And so shortly after Trump was elected for the second time, I knew for absolute sure that I had to get to Vietnam. I had started it before, but I threw gasoline on it and accelerated it and moved to Vietnam, but I was able to move with the company I've been with for 8 years because they smartly set up a satellite office in Ho Chi Minh City during the first Trump administration and were able to bring a lot of clients over from China to Vietnam. So back to the tariffs. So then shortly after he was elected, the tariff went up to 25%, which was awful. And then there were the reciprocal tariffs that we were really threatened by at first, but then those are actually not included in the steel and aluminum tariffs, which meant I was exempt from the reciprocal tariffs that were announced on Liberation Day on April 3rd last year. And I was just paying the Section 232, which is 25%. But then Trump increased that to 50% in June. And that was moving to Vietnam did not help me at that point because the tariff is on aluminum and steel regardless of the country of origin. So I was really only saving a little bit by me being in Vietnam. In China, I was still paying the fentanyl tariff, which was 10%. So China was a little bit more, but still moved most of it over to Vietnam. And then in the fall, there was a threat of 100% tariff across the board, which would have, for me, would have been 100 plus 50 I was already paying. But then that was changed again. So I didn't have to pay that 100% plus tariff, while those in the reciprocal category did. Many of them had to pay that up to like 150%. Like I have manufacturer friends who literally abandoned containers on the ocean because their tariff bill would have been so much more than when the container hit the water. So there's sort of a trend of either redirecting containers to another country like the Philippines, which has a big industry around this now, or abandoning containers entirely. I did not need to do that. I had to raise my prices, obviously. I was at the 50% tariff. We actually didn't raise prices. We did a tariff surcharge, which is sort of across the board and is easier to turn on and off. That was sort of a price.
So it is a true statement that the American consumer does pay the tariff, right?
They do. Yep. The American consumer pays the tariff. You don't always know where. For us, it was very transparent. So then if we go back to the tariff story, just 2 weeks ago, my tariff luckily went from 50 to 25% because of the Section 232 adjustment. And for me, I mean, my product is 90% metal. So for me, it was just all great, 50 to 25%. But for some people who are, let's say, are only 20% metal, then they had to jump up to 25%. So that's the only time I've ever been glad that my product is 90% metal, because it sort of made me feel good that I'm obviously always going to be in that metal category. And I've shifted from 50 to 25%. But then the next chapter in this is that I'm also manufacturing in Indiana. And that was in response to this chaos. We're working in sort of small production orders with them. We did an RFP to about 6 different metal fabricators in the US after again, I'll say in quotes, Liberation Day in April of 2025. And there was one company that just really outperformed the others. They're in Indiana. And so now in terms of pricing, I'm still working through this, but I really need to have sort of a blended rate between what I'm paying in Asia and what I'm paying in North America, because they can change any which way. I don't want to keep changing my pricing. I want to sort of figure, like, for now and forever, I'm always going to be manufacturing in Asia and North America. So my pricing cannot be, where is this batch manufactured? It means across the whole product line. How do I make sure? And, for me as a small business, that's really confusing. For big companies, automakers, they blend the rates from every component that they get. And it's not like you see a price for Asia or a price for the US. That's something I need to evolve into, because it also depends on the proportion of US versus Asia, and it depends on the changing tariff rates.
So you mentioned something. Let's zoom in on the Indiana situation. You mentioned that in one of the interviews, I believe, and the public coverage that you had, that you would love to manufacture in the United States, but you not necessarily can,
Right.
or you, in many cases, you can't. And the reality is even more interesting, because roughly 10% of your production is running in the United States and Indiana today. And you are turning US on, which is great. But tell me more about why is it that manufacturers like yourself can't manufacture in the United States in many cases?
I mean, the price of labor is so much higher in the US than it is in Asia. There's no getting around it. I mean, as an American, I want everyone to be paid as much as they can, but the price of labor is just so much higher. The other thing is that the factories that I'm using actually use more manual processes with equipment that they've entirely paid for. And so they're not amortizing the cost of their machinery to me like in the US. So the factories I toured in the US were very more high tech, more automated, not as manual. And they have to put those fees on their customers. And that was so it's labor and the cost of machinery, really, I think is the difference. But the other part of it is just the workforce. So there's not a lot of stuff manufactured in the US anymore. And part of it is that this country has not been investing in the manufacturing sector, not investing in trade education. You know, in my lifetime, if you went to trade school, it was usually because you sort of ended up there. Like you may not have had good enough grades to go to a regular 4-year college. There's a stigma against trade education. There's not a stigma against working in the trades in most countries in the world. And like Germany, for example, they have great trade education and they have a lot of pride in their engineering and their manufacturing. Most German people I've worked with as I've been a manufacturer have a really balanced skill set of sort of the white collar and the blue collar. And it's rare to find Americans that have that blend. That's another reason why a lot of my employees are not American. A lot of my employees are actually from Venezuela, which is a lot in the news. That's a whole separate thing. But part of the reason why they do well in my company is that I can have a salesperson who also is an installer. Because in high school or from their father or grandfather, they were taught how to use tools and how to build things and how to fix things. And they may also have a 4-year education. And so that blend, it hurts Americans that we don't train people, men and women, to have some sort of manual technical skills. Um, you know, a lot of Americans don't even own a drill. They don't know how to do things. In other countries, they do. And so with Asia, there's no lack of laborers to build my product. In the US, unfortunately, there is, both in terms of the number of factories and the number of workers.
Yeah, my goodness, you're so right about this. I work with a lot of European and Asian companies as well, and it's incredible, to see the differences, between our inflection points, our concentration, our focus over the last, I would say, 20 years, right? I mean, I remember my high school back in Brooklyn, where I was taking drafting classes and labs and so forth. There was actually, the trade education in high school at that time was mandatory.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, something just switched, and we got into, liberal arts, and nothing wrong with that, of course. But I remember at that time the trade schools were advertising everywhere in subways, video, television everywhere. And all of a sudden, there's just poof, one day it just disappeared.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping it's coming back again, but I'm just wondering if it's too late.
Well, see, my future business I will share here is probably going to be a trade school, actually. It's way off in the future, but as an entrepreneur, I think, what is my next thing that I really care about? And as an American and as a manufacturer, I want to be a part of revitalizing American manufacturing, even if it's in a small way. So, there probably will be more investment in trade education. Like that is maybe one thing that might come out of this administration. I haven't really seen it yet, but it would make sense for them to invest in trade education if the tariffs are supposed to help our manufacturing industries. So yeah, it's different. And then back to my own high school, I took a typing class, which a few years after that were replaced with computers. And we all know where that went. So, trade education, taking typewriter, typing classes, it wasn't a thing for a long time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I used to take typing classes as well in high school.
Yeah.
That's why I can type 60 words a minute on my
Yeah.
keyboard,
Yeah,
right?
they're really
But
good
of course,
skills.
all of that, Yeah, because all of that is, I mean, that was useful for a few years. All of that is now being replaced by voice and artificial intelligence and so forth and so on. But let me ask you something. If there was a playbook for a small manufacturer in the United States who is probably dreading a call from the freight forwarder or another, uh, another reaction from the White House to what's going on in the world right now, or what have you. What would that playbook look like? The top three items, right? How should they prepare? What should they think of how should they anticipate or mitigate the risk, if you will? What should they do?
So I think the biggest, best thing to mitigate the risk is to manufacture in Asia and in North America. Because 10 years from now, things probably won't be so unstable, but they always could be in the future, administration to administration. So just like a stock portfolio where you diversify your risk, I've done that with manufacturing. And it's something where you really need to look into it, even if you don't go down that path. But it's risky to have one vendor for anything. And I'm lucky that I have had a great vendor in Asia for all this time. But if I hadn't, my whole Asia experiment could have failed and the whole company might have failed because I already knew that it was hard to do it in the US. So having a plan to diversify your manufacturing across continents and even within, like in North America, like I have Indiana, but I'm also looking into another state right now for a different product line. So our Brisbane product is primarily sold in the West. It would make sense logistically to have my manufacturing and my fulfillment done there. So right now our warehouse is in Brooklyn, but with the Brisbane, as that grows, we know that we're going to have a DC in the West. And that's the sort of like, you just don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. You never know what is going to happen. Another thing I would say is you need to have a community of peers that it is going through this. So for me, a group like EO, I know global manufacturers that are all dealing with tariffs from all sides of it. And we're on WhatsApp. And through all this confusion, it's actually sort of become a tariff support group where people that are facing a quick switch, I mean, which happens like, I don't know, at first it was happening like every couple of weeks and now it's a little more stable. But right now with people that are trying to get their refunds, there's still confusion about that too. So I would say if your question is how can you sort of deal with it, you need to have a community of peers that's going through it. Some of them are probably paying for lawyers and consultants. You can get advice from them, see what they're hearing, especially when things are moving so quickly. Like a lot of the tariff announcements I've noticed happen on Friday nights after the market closes. And then you have the whole weekend to freak out about it. Well, I don't have to freak out on my own when the 100% tariff was and the 50% were announced on Friday nights. Throughout the weekend, I could talk to peers to see what they were going to do about it.
Let's talk about apologies and being apologetic. I mean, American manufacturers simply cannot disconnect Asia, simply cannot disconnect China. But I see throughout the media and press and so forth that has been almost, put to shame or something like that. I mean, that movement is kind of there. Should American manufacturers, especially small, medium-sized ones, be apologetic about doing business in Asia?
I mean, that's really like personality based. As a business person, you need to do what keeps your business going. And for me, my business is like my child. So if I need to move manufacturing to Asia to protect my child and to protect my paycheck and my husband's paycheck, I'm going to do it. So when I tell people, everyone can understand what it's like to suddenly get no paycheck or to get a lower paycheck. And everyone also understands as taxpayers, how would it feel if your income tax changed from 7.5% to 52.5% in 2 weeks with 2 weeks notice? Can you imagine finding out on April 1st that your 30% rate was going to 75%? Would anybody put up with that? They wouldn't. But you're only going to feel it right now if you're a manufacturer and that jump is so high. So I sometimes explain it to people that way. A tariff is a tax. Tariff is a tax. In the US, when we pay an income tax, at least we know we're getting something for it. We get roads, we get schools, we get all manner of protection. If I'm paying a tariff I'm not getting anything. Like, I'm not even getting $100 in my community for the 400,000 I spent in tariffs last year. And I'm probably going to spend just as much this year. So being apologetic, I mean, obviously I'm really opinionated on it, but people as taxpayers, if you think about it from that perspective, they will empathize with how it would feel to have your tax rate jacked up so much with absolutely no notice. And I'll tell you, it's even worse than that. And I'll tell you why. At least you can delay or get an extension on your income taxes. I can't get an extension on my tariff rate. I can't get my product in the Port of Elizabeth until I've paid the tax, the tariff. I can't
Yeah,
extend that. I could get some
absolutely.
predatory finance person to pay for it. Luckily, I haven't been able to do it, but you don't get an extension like you do as a taxpayer. So it's even worse. The rate hike and the ability to pay is cut off with the way they're doing it.
What a great analogy. It's so very much true that you really have no control over it, and you basically aren't, you are on your own
Yeah.
with this one. You shared something with me earlier, and you said, wouldn't it be great if at least you could divert, at least you had a decision to say, by paying this tariff, some of that money will go back to your local community. Tell us about that idea and how would you implement that?
So I wrote a LinkedIn piece back in November that the title was, Please Garnish My Tariffs. No one wants anything garnished, but I'm actually asking for it. I'm asking for someone, the state or the city, to step in and say to the Treasury, say to Trump administration, we want to keep X percent back in the state of New York, the city of New York, the community of Brooklyn. Garnish it. Like, do something. That can't all disappear into the Treasury. The billions of dollars that people have paid, we get no benefit as taxpayers. That is a tax that's back into our community. So I would say how it would be implemented, I'll let the policymakers figure that out. And I honestly, I don't see them doing it. We'll see, although Governor Hochul in New York is suing the government right now for the tariffs, partly on behalf of consumers, a little bit on behalf of businesses. But what if she were to say, let's hold 10% of it. Let's try to intercept that money somehow, whether it be legal or through some other means, and say, we're going to take this money and we're going to put it back into the revitalization of industry and manufacturing in New York. I'm in an industrial business zone in Brooklyn at Industry City. It's zoned for manufacturing, but yet I don't manufacture there. What if some of that money could come back and I could reshore some of it? So, I mean, I don't think it's like a crazy idea. And I don't care if it's a crazy idea. I don't. I think more manufacturers need to be saying it. What are we getting for this? Reinvesting it in the things that they say are the reasons for the tariffs.
Liz, as an entrepreneur, what would be your advice to young entrepreneurs who are trying to make their business in manufacturing, who are trying to deal with tariff situation, which is totally unpredictable, and who are trying to become a voice, so to speak, right? Because, I mean, hopefully when there are too many loud voices, maybe somebody will hear that. What would be your advice?
So this is advice I give to all potential entrepreneurs, regardless of industry. And that's make sure there's a customer need. Don't build something, manufacture something in a speculative way. Only go into manufacturing it if you really solidly know. So it's okay to prototype, like learning, putting it out there, getting beta testers, but don't put in any sort of major production order or go down that path unless you absolutely know there's a customer need, because it's expensive. If you have high quantities and you're in a warehouse situation, you're going to be paying for rent on that as well. That really is my main advice. And again, it doesn't have to specifically do with manufacturing, but even if you're, in the dining industry, just because you like to cook doesn't mean you should start a restaurant. There may not be a big enough audience for what you want to do. And then you get a rent and you hire people and you come up with all your marketing expenses, and then no one comes to your restaurant. So test it out in ways that are inexpensive before you scale something up.
Great advice. Liz, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a privilege to talk to you. I can see now why Bloomberg, NBC, and NPR were so interested in this story. Congratulations on that. And congratulations and best of luck to Citibin. Knowing you, I know it's going to be even a bigger success than what it is right now. And let's hope that the situation between the two countries or between the two regions will also change. I know there's a trip coming up for an American president to meet Mr. Xi, and hopefully they'll work something out,
I
that's going
really
to
hope
benefit
so.
both.
That
Yeah,
would be
I'm
great.
pretty sure Apple is looking at this entire situation with the bated breath, and and they're not about to, you know, close down their operation in China. So thank you so much for being with us, and it's been amazing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. It's great talking about this, and I'm really glad that you're providing businesses with a platform.
Thanks.